Good evening, everyone. It is 6:33, Thursday, February 24th, 2022. My name is Amy Wiltsey. I'm the Finance Committee Chairperson, and I call this meeting to order. Our first agenda item tonight is with Mrs. Mangini, a presentation of capital budget, please.
Good evening, everyone. We don't have a formal presentation for you this evening. We did email you the copies of the budget as well as providing you with hard copies this evening. And this is the capital budget, the 5-year capital plan that we really are pleased to be able to share with you. It's a result of a comprehensive process that actually began last October. And it began with requests from each school and department, and through my office and Mr. Ruggiero, we vetted out all the requests, looked into them, prioritized them, met as district administration with Dr. Asunde and our team to further review the items. And this year we took an extra step. I think it's something that had happened a few years ago and in the past year, where we actually sat with Renee Serra, the Public Works Director, who is very much a part of the town's capital budget, and Chris Kamiak, and we kind of discussed where the town can be, where we need to be, and tried to come to a collective plan that worked for both sides. What you'll see in our capital plan is that around, I think it's the top of page 5, there's a subtotal. The reason for that is the items following that subtotal are for mostly Bunnell High School as well as some for flood. And they're significant items that the town has contemplated and are further considering going out to do a school bonding project for them at some point in the future. I mean, there's no commitments there, but they do realize that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So Katie will be happy to hear that, Dr. Graff. But that is the reason that you will see us pretty much trying to stay around that $4 million mark for each of the years. And I really don't feel that in any way did we shortchange the district with this plan. As I said, we were very thoughtful about prioritizing it based on our needs. A couple of years it jumps up, particularly as we get to those outer years. But obviously, if you go to the very end on page 6, the totals for those outer years are significantly higher because they include Bunnell High School and some work at flood as well. So we're prepared to answer any questions you may have on any of these items. Mr. Henry?
Yeah, I haven't had a chance really to digest it, but you said the inner years we were trying to keep around the $4 million mark?
In total.
What years would those be?
If you go to page 5, the top of page 5, our subtotal amounts for fiscal year 23 would be $4,032,000. And then fiscal year 24, $4,061,000, then $4.1 million, and then it goes up a bit. But we were trying to stay within that range.
And then, so the last page is just for Bunnell?
No, it includes a couple of items for flood. The auditorium update on the bottom of page 5, lockers in the hallway, the more significantly costly areas, the pool area and the replacement of flooring. So those are remaining on,
that would be a $20 million investment in that school.
I'm sure. And that's why we're putting it after the subtotal because, as I said, there's been a lot of discussion about whether or not that will become a state school building project that will be bonded.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions that pertain to the capital improvement plan? No? Thank you, Mrs. Mangini. This is very comprehensive. Yes, Mr. Furman.
A question. Are any of these buildings being considered for renovation or rebuild as new, which would allow some of this to then be, or all of their particular items to be moved into that project?
Only, I believe, to the best of my knowledge, Bunnell and flood, and that's why they're were subtotaled it prior to that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Other questions that pertain to this report? Okay, thank you very much again, Mrs. Angie. We are now going to go into open discussion to synthesize the data provided during the budget workshop process. And just a reminder to everyone, this year's budget is a 4.6% increase of to be $125,711,920, an increase of $5.5 million. So we've heard from many administrators about proposed budgets and requests from school administrators, and this would be our time to ask additional questions, suggest certain revisions. Mrs. Lance.
Through the chair, Mr. Delapiano and Mrs. Graff. I know that in our discussions, there were 2 high school teachers cut from the original budget, and I know you each, I need to know how many you asked for when you originally decided what you wanted. I mean, because I remember sitting on the board 3-4 years ago when we decided to go with the block scheduling, and we were told that you needed so many more teachers, and I personally feel you haven't gotten those teachers, and to be cutting teachers from the high school, I think it's going to be detrimental to the district. So I would like to hear from both of you what you asked for and your rationale. Please.
Just for a point of order, I think that question should go through the superintendent, to just usually the protocol on that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Unless the superintendent wants the high school teachers to answer, but usually we go to the superintendent.
Absolutely. I will end up deferring to my colleagues, which had
I
a
apologize.
conversation about FCEs and the needs of the high school. We're still going through a master scheduling process and frequent conversations with Joanna and Najari and Garda. Again, this is a recommendation. It's not a desire, okay? We understand we have to put forth a responsible budget. And in our conversations with each of our principals, they definitely spoke about additional needs, right? That would help, particularly with some of the scheduled design shifts that we've had over the last couple of years. But at this time, I would like to call on my colleagues and certainly share some of the same conversations that we've had in the past.
I'll go first. In my discussion with Mrs. Mangini and Dr. Sunday, my first initial request was for 2 new full-time teachers, specifically to teach electives courses. As we've shifted into our 8-drop-2 schedule, we've seen an increase in the need for students to be scheduled into electives classes. And simply put, there is very little space in those electives classes. Many of them are capped, and thus resulting in students taking 2 or more study halls.
And I'd like to add, very similar to what Dr. Graff said, in addition to the change in schedule is also the increase in graduation requirements to 25, which prompted the change to an 8-period schedule. Chatham High School this year looked for an increase of 3.4 teachers. Our current scheduled students for next year is 1,168, I think, with about 5 to go. So it's the largest Stratford High School enrollment probably in the last 10 to 15 years. So our goal was to, again, offer elective classes, probably increase potential in one of the humanities by a 0.3. The rest would go to electives because, as Dr. Graff said, we're in the same situation where, you know, it's difficult to schedule students in elective classes at this point of the year right now.
I'd like to also add that we're at a point now, if we have new registrations coming in, we're actually having to go into existing student schedules and removing them from electives courses in order to open up a space for the new registration. So it's having a direct impact on our currently enrolled students.
Thank you very much. And I apologize if I went to them before I came to you. I apologize.
Thank you, Mrs. Lentz. I was actually going to propose this evening that these 2 positions that have been recommended as cuts from the high school be added to our proposed budget. We did a lot of work last year to speak on block scheduling and the increase of teachers needed at the high school due to the graduation requirements. And so I do not feel comfortable with this recommendation, and I would like to recommend that we as a committee add it back to the proposal.
Well, that's a motion, I would second that.
Right now, it's just a discussion, but since that, I will make a motion that these two high school teachers be added back into the proposal for the budget, 22-23. Thank you, Mr. David, for your second.
And just for clarification, that would be $157,740
Yes.
back into the budget. And I don't have that exact increase.
I asked actually Mrs. Nicholson to be with us tonight. She's a master at these numbers.
Actually, I do have a scorecard
Thank you.
prepared. I think that might catch Susan a little off guard, because I don't think she has a computer with her at the moment, so we're good. I will track it for you.
Very good.
All these years, we thought she was doing the numbers in her head.
Well, you know what, she might have been. So that's going to bring you to a 4.73% increase. This dies, we'll go to the other.
Okay, thank you. Teresa, will this require a roll call vote?
You could just say all in favor, anyone opposed.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
So is there more discussion?
Discussion, yeah. So, just so I understand the process correctly, this is the Finance Committee who is set in place to make recommendations to the full board. So,
Correct.
our full vote and final discussion will come on Monday as to the numbers, correct?
It could.
That's correct.
Okay, so we will table that for Monday, but the
I don't think
motion
anything.
says.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, 20, since, well,
We can do that Monday.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, got it.
We have Finance Committee Monday night. Okay. Thank you again, Mrs. Lance.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, suggestions, topics for conversation? Mrs. Corcoran.
I mean, I asked regarding the enrichment program. I know right now we're operating with one enrichment teacher as opposed to the two that we have in our current budget. And that one teacher is servicing, I believe Dr. Gator told me, 82 children. And so I would propose also retaining one enrichment position. So reducing then by one enrichment teacher. And trying to hold on to the enrichment program. I do feel as if we continue to shave away programs, particularly at the elementary level. I know we lost foreign language a few years ago, and elementary instrumental is constantly on the table. So, you know, I'd like to stop the cuts if possible.
Thank you. Mrs. Mangini, do you have a total?
Yeah, that brings you to a 4.8% increase, or a budget total of $125,949,660.
Can you give that number again?
Yeah, $125,949,660 equates to a 4.8% increase.
Mr. Proto?
Thank you, Ms. Wiltie. Question, Pam. The open position that you had given us that were open as of February 14th, are those positions budgeted currently for this coming year?
For fiscal year 22, the year we're in?
Yes.
Yes.
And the two high school positions, what would those be?
I believe you're referring to, and Courtney Brown is here, our HR director, but I believe you are referring to the high school principal positions?
No, the two high school teachers
that are
that Ms. Wiltie wants to put back in, what would they be teaching?
The recommendation, and Dr. Sunday could certainly speak to this better than I, but it was to look at scheduling to see if there were opportunities to tweak some of the full FTEs, because we do have some point whatever 4s or 6s and try to make up a total of 1.0. It wasn't one direct teacher.
So these are not two, we're not funding two brand-new full-time 100% positions if we do this.
Correct.
And in addition to that, we still have to fill at Stratford High the health occupation teacher,
We have.
which we budgeted for.
Correct.
And the two teachers, I mean, Dr. Sunday may be best for this, would you anticipate those to be more than a 0.5 upgrade?
Totally understand your question.
Well, you've reduced two full-time employees in your budget. Ms. Mangini just said that if we put those back, we're not really hiring two full-time people. We're going to be hiring roughly a 0.5 or a 0.6 person to fill to a point, somebody who might be a 0.4 or 0.5 now. My question is, do you anticipate that these two positions would be somebody who's now less than a 0.5 person, teacher?
It's hard to answer that question because we're still going through the master scheduling process right now. So until that data touches down, and I know Jack's having some information today, Katie, we've had some of those conversations. So until I have those hard numbers in front of me, it'd be hard to make that.
So the $157,740 that we're going to be putting back in, is that equivalent to two 100% new teachers, or is that equivalent to 2.5 teachers going to, or is it equivalent to 2.6 or 2 point? You had to have figured somewhat two people at some level to come up with that number.
Those are each full-time equivalents.
So those are each full-time equivalents. So what I'm trying to understand, and if we take a 0.5 person and make them a 1, it's not 100, or if we take 2.5 people and make them each a 1, it's not 157,740, it's half of that.
It wouldn't.
What's that?
It wouldn't.
I'm sorry?
It wouldn't be.
It would be half of that.
If you have that.
I think basically by reinstating, it's just status quo.
That's what's
Because we were eliminating 1.0, equivalent of 1.0 FTE at each high school. By adding it back into your budget, now there would be no reduction in staff at the high school.
we would be keeping the same numbers as it is in this fiscal year.
You're keeping the same number of people, but not the same dollar amount.
It would be budgeted for the same dollar amount. It wouldn't shift.
Cut from the budget.
No, I understand what's a cut from the budget. What I'm saying is that if 157,000 is equivalent to hiring two 100% people,
Right.
but we're only going to hire two 50% people because we already have a 50% person, we're only paying them 50% now. That was the question I had.
Oh, okay. No.
It's going to be 100% new person.
Go-
Mr. Daly.
Yeah, that's not what they just said.
Going on Ben's, I just want to follow the whole logic with the FTEs again. When we add an FTE, say it's 72,000, that's the number. With that, I'm assuming that's with benefits too, right? We don't put the 25,000 back into health insurance though. Or how do you do that? That's a better
good question. And to clarify, when we provide you with reductions on positions, we are going to provide the lowest, one of the lower costs as savings because there's bumping that's going to occur
Correct.
more often than not. So this figure is $60,000 for each of the positions, 120, plus the 1.45% for employer tax, plus what we estimate for health insurance.
Right, but we don't take health, we don't put it back in the other bucket. We just take it, we don't take it out of two buckets when we hire FTE. Or if we take out an FTE, we don't take it out of two buckets. We're only taking it out of one bucket. We've always done it that way, right? Are you still doing it that way or not? Is that
Susan,
fair?
I think we took it out of health insurance
We
as
took it
well.
out of health
Yeah.
insurance as well.
You did, okay.
So it was.
So if we reinstate that money, that's how, you put it back in two different buckets again.
Yeah, we'll be putting it back into salary.
Yep.
So right now, in the salary accounts, they're just being reduced by 60,000 for one school and $60,000 for the other.
Right.
And then the health insurance, the difference is in the health insurance, and some might be in the FICA Medicare.
Right, whatever little bump, correct. All right, thank you.
But to be clear, it's not a dollar over the 157,740. That is the entire total.
Yeah, that's what we state.
Mrs. Lang?
My question is to the superintendent again, but I think it's going to go to Dr. Gata. Enrichment teachers, could somebody explain to me how the math coaches work with the enrichment teachers? Do they directly service those students in the elementary school or not?
I will defer that to Dr.
Thank you.
Can you, I'm sorry, would you?
The math people in each school.
Right.
Do they give enrichment in the classroom, or do they pull kids out and they do it for the enrichment classes? Are the math tutors they're not tutors, are the math coaches involved with the enrichment program in the elementary school?
There are times when they are. It's not consistent. There are several units to the enrichment program, which are primarily STEM units. And so where they can and they are available to work with a group that's doing a particular activity, then they will become involved. But technically, they're not, considered to be, part of the enrichment program, except when it comes to math activities and things like that. And that's grade 4, 5, and 6. And so they support the enrichment teacher, and we only have one enrichment teacher right now. But to be honest with you, we haven't been in this situation before where we've only had one. Sam Rosenberg has been helping out quite a bit because the enrichment teacher is new to the district. And so she's supporting her in that. And quite frankly, our math coaches have been, helping to support their buildings, in this COVID situation.
Would it be feasible to have the math coaches, one of their, part of their job description be to work with the enrichment students in math? I think, when I think of, and I mean, I've been out a little while, but when I think of enrichment, I remember when they had the ALS program and the kids were accelerated in math. And I'm wondering if they do that anymore now, and it could be one of their, part of their job description, that they would work with those students in the class, those elementary schools on a daily basis, or maybe twice weekly or something like that. Is that possible?
And the children that, are in their building are their children, the math coaches' children. So obviously when they can, they would provide that kind of support. But for the most part, the enrichment teacher would be the one who sets up the curriculum, sets up the activities, etc. And they might call the math coach in for a demonstration or to work with the students. But it isn't going to be on a regular basis. If you have a math coach that's working with a whole building of, of students and teachers. So, but that's certainly a great connection.
Are there any, and I'm just using as an example, are there any, I think back to when I was at Worcester, are there any 4th grade students who go to a 6th grade math class?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Okay.
But you mentioned the math program and enrichment, where students who are capable, have an opportunity maybe to take algebra in 8th grade. And so, we're looking at providing those opportunities for students who, are able to move forward in 8th grade, perhaps to take algebra.
Thank you.
Mrs. Adele?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's a listing of a reduction of 2 enrichment teachers, correct, Dr. Sunday? And there's only currently one. There's one open position. That one teacher, and maybe with a little help from Ms. Rosenberg, are servicing 82 students. How much enrichment are those students getting on a weekly basis? How many times are they seeing those?
Well, typically, when the program has 2 enrichment teachers, there are 8 buildings with 4th grades in them, and so
it's only for 4th grade?
No, they also support the 5th and 6th grade, but the 4th grade program is where students are sort of enter into the enrichment program. They're identified at the end of 3rd grade, and then they move into 4th grade. So in the past, what's happened is each enrichment teacher would have 4 schools that they worked with, And so there was a dedicated day of the week where they were in that building full-time. And so that's, they try, even now, as challenging as it is, they try to provide the same amount of time per building, even though it might not look exactly the way it has been in the past. So you have one person now who's going to 8 buildings, basically. So it's challenging, but the program itself, we try to keep as balanced as possible throughout each of the buildings, so that students in each building, they may have to offer not as many activities as they have in the past, because there's only one person who's delivering it, but that they would make sure that each building gets the same type of activities or, opportunities for the kids.
Thank you.
So I can probably share that I think this is a good talking point, because this gives us an opportunity, and I hear Ms. Land speak about how do we continue to make the program even more robust and service more and more kids. So I actually appreciate this conversation topic here. As I said a few weeks back when I made the recommendation to consider this position, okay, again, like I said, it's not ideal. We don't want to lose personnel, but we have to take a deeper look at our programs and figure out how we can, for lack of a better word, enrich it, right, to make it a little bit more robust and service kids in more efficient ways.
Dr. Gaeta?
Well, I was just going to say, to add to that, now all 4th graders, as a result of this program, have an opportunity to participate in the Invention Convention. And so that's one of the areas that the enrichment teacher and Mrs. Rosenberg helped to support the teachers in the classroom with helping their kids work through the Invention Convention process. And we're coming to judging time, if anybody's interested and would like to judge Invention Convention, let Sam Rosenberg know.
Thank you, Dr. Gaeta. Mrs. Corcoran, did I see your hand up regarding
Yeah, so
this conversation?
it's not terribly important, but I just wanted to give, my personal experience with the Enrichment Program. My son is a member of it, and, as a parent, I can tell you that it is valuable time spent. He gets pulled out once a week. They're working on building a space station on Mars. And he gets, he doesn't get excited about everything about school, but he gets excited about this. So it's nice to see him engaged in the learning process. So, as a parent, I do appreciate whatever we're able to offer our learners in that sense. So.
Mr. David?
So yes, we also, in the cuts, superintendent's cuts for this year, one is the STEM coordinator. And what I'm just hearing now is the enrichment teachers actually roll up to the STEM coordinator. So how is that going to work? If we're cutting the STEM coordinator and we have 2 enrichment teachers, if we put them back in the budget?
Well, I don't think that's the model, and Dr. Gaeta,
Oh, it's not the model?
all on you. Right now, Mrs. Rosenberg is helping deliver enrichment opportunities to the students for the one position that we have not been able to fill, correct?
Yes.
Right. So I don't think it's a roll-up.
Oh, it's not a roll-up? Okay.
No. Sam is one of the hardest workers, brilliant, professional, and where we found a gap, she wanted to make sure that the kids continue to receive the service, so she's helping out as much as she can with our cohort of kids.
Just as a thought to finalize my thinking around this, I come from the enrichment program myself. I was in there myself, and I think that we can offer more than just one day a week. Those projects like building Mars or building a space station on Mars, I think those things can be offered in different ways, perhaps by the math coaches like Ms. Lance suggested, or in other ways than servicing 82 students all at once. So,
Mrs. Gibby?
So, sorry about that. Is this better?
Tilt it down a little.
Back it up.
Not sure.
Just turn it off, and I'll talk loudly. Hopefully you can hear me. Okay, so for the STEM coordinator, is that the position we were talking about that we have two in our district where many other districts have, one filling that role from K through 12, right? Are we going to have our current, 7 through 12 coordinator take this role on if, let's say, this is the plan that we move forward with? Is that the intention? Did we increase the line item for that person, or I'm just trying to understand like the numbers of it, right? Because a few years ago, we changed and created this position. There's that cost. How do we handle it now that we're kind of rolling it up into one person?
Yeah, so we're talking about system-wide responsibility, and we've had a similar design with our literacy position. But we also believe we have some opportunities there with certainly at the secondary level. We have some brilliant department heads at each high school who can end up collaborating with each coordinator to supplant some of the responsibilities that might have to get absorbed by this reduction.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Lang?
Dr. Sunday, you were saying how the other STEM coordinator used to be the only STEM coordinator in the district and all. Are there any other administrative positions that we can look at to see if we don't need how do I say this the right way? That we can consolidate some of those positions so that we can have more teachers in the classroom?
I think there's no easy way to answer that question. I will tell you this, before we made our recommendations, I looked at the entire organization across every school that we have. And there are certain key positions that feed into certain outcomes, accountability outcomes, that should be tied to board goals. And if some of those positions are absent, it makes it a little bit more complex to make progress towards any of those goals. But beyond that, when you think about administrative work, our teachers are extremely hardworking. And part of our capacity development is appropriate supervision. So when we start to condense the volume of administrators that we have, we absorb a little bit more evaluation and supervisory responsibility. But in the same context of what the normal school day looks like, between the work that our principals, our administrators, and department supervisors do to support kids, research data, plan meetings, if they, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to characterize this, but you also want people to be in the classroom to be able to adequately support teachers. So if an administrator is responding to a student issue, meeting with parents, trying to compile information for a faculty meeting, that's less time that they're working with teachers. And if you look at our data over the last couple of years, we are in need, and we're positioned for some dramatic improvement. Okay, so we need to make sure that we have instructional leaders who can support the work of our teachers, get the right information in their hands, create schedules that allow them to collaborate, and have conversations that are centered on improvement for kids. And in the absence of those things, because the responsibility of the administrator is too wide in scope, it makes it a little bit more challenging, and it makes those improvement measures a little bit more elusive to reach. So, long story short, we did that analysis, and at this point in time, there isn't a place that I would make a recommendation, because all those positions that we have remaining are tied to some kind of essential outcome that reflects the organizational health of the district.
Thank you.
Mr. Proto, did you have your hand up?
I did. Educational Reserve Fund. Are we accounting for that at all in the budget?
We could not do that even if the town did fund it, but don't forget there is no funding of it to date, and we have no control over those funds. We can only request the use of them under specific guidelines.
So the town has not funded any amount into that fund that they created?
To the best of my knowledge, no.
Including roughly $500,000 that they were supposed to when we started this?
Correct.
Mrs. Mangini? Sorry, go ahead.
So I have a related question, and just for clarification, this education reserve fund is what, when you first started here, you were saying that the state allows a certain percentage of unspent funds to go in there for specific uses, right? Like, this is the account we're talking about?
Correct.
And we've never had that in place prior to when you came and said, you guys don't have this, you should, it's best practice, correct?
I don't believe I was the person to initiate it. I think it was, they had begun as a town and the Board of Ed to talk about it. And the state statute provides for 2% of our general operating budget amount that can be transferred into that account. But the town was taking the first steps, and I did work closely with Ms. Savo because I was familiar with the process, and I helped a little bit minimally with the language because they had the 1% in there, and I knew the law had changed. But they had to first establish that fund, and it took time and some steps because it was an ordinance process through the ordinance committee. And it was ultimately, I believe, in place around December of 2020, maybe January of 2021. And within the language of that ordinance, it's very clear that they cannot make any appropriation until the third quarter of the fiscal year, which is understandable. They're waiting for their audit to be complete. But that was the fiscal year 21, so there was no action taken at that point.
Okay, so I am referring to the correct fund,
You are.
right? Okay. So, and you've worked in other districts before, and they've always had something like this in place, right? Can you speak a little bit about how those funds have been used to not have such a strain on the budget each year? Had we had this in place years ago, what could we have looked like, hypothetically?
I do understand. The Education Reserve Fund in most districts and towns is kind of, as you know, the boards of education cannot retain any funds. At the end of the year, our general operating budget, if there's anything left, it all goes back to the town. The town, of course, can have a reserve fund, and they do have their fund balance. And while we might be criticized sometimes for having money left, the towns are applauded, as they should be, because if you can manage to save money during the year, then you're increasing your fund balance on the town side and ultimately having a more secure, stable financial base. Having said that, in other towns, it's usually limited to what you can use it for, which is absolutely correct. The ordinance was written correctly, and the areas are for capital, such as technology, for one-time unanticipated expenses, and it specifically states for unanticipated special education costs. And I think had it been in place, 2 years now, we've been under a spending freeze for our discretionary accounts, limiting resources to our classrooms, because I really do not know how to guide all of you any better than I'm doing right now, because I don't know where the year is going to end up. As I will report to you on Monday, I've been reporting, but it just keeps increasing. We have a significant deficit projected in our budget. And if we had $1 million or $2 million in the Education Reserve Fund, this would be the perfectly appropriate use of it, and it would eliminate the strain not only on us, but quite frankly on the town, because if we can't recognize those savings and end our year in the black, the town is ultimately financially responsible. So it would serve us all. And my discussions with the town, quite frankly, they do understand that. And hopefully they're going to take action in the near future.
Thank you. Okay. I had two follow-up questions to that. Actually, one is a statement. When you say strain on, the first thing that came to my mind is our classrooms, right? With that freeze and not being able to do all that they really want to be able to do. And the second thing was just that final number. I know I was there and I should probably remember the exact amount, but do you remember the exact amount that was?
Yeah, I think it pops up in my head during the night. In fiscal year 21, the balance was $577,000. And we also received, I believe, about $178,000 that the town received beyond their revenue number in their budget for fiscal year 21 for the excess cost grant. So those two
What's that second number?
amounts could be considered for appropriation to the Education Reserve Fund.
So that's a total of 755.
Right. And then we did have, I don't know if the audit is complete yet for the town. I know they had an extension, but we had over $1 million left for fiscal year 21. So that was fiscal year 20. Fiscal year 21, we had over $1 million. I'm sorry, I think I misspoke there the first time.
Madam Chair.
Mrs. Bedell?
There was you said 1.1 million on top of the 577 and 178. Okay, I just checked right, thank you.
So a rough total would be 1.75 million.
Which would almost cover the deficit we have currently in special education.
Exactly.
So then we wouldn't have to, I'm sorry.
Mrs. Dayton?
So basically, Pam, from my understanding, so if we did have that 1.75 million that was supposed to be put in that educational reserve fund, it would be able to almost cover the special education deficit that we have.
Correct.
So then we wouldn't have had to put a freeze on classroom supplies. Correct?
That is correct. Of course, I just want to preface this by saying, again, the way the ordinance is written, we would have to make the request.
No, I understand that. I just want to understand, like, you know.
Yep. No, you're absolutely right, but it's not like we can just go to that account and take the money.
No, I understand, and I understand it can, like, cover the special education cost. You know, as a classroom teacher myself, to hear that we have to put a freeze on that because this money is not covering what it's supposed to is, you know.
Can I say something on
Hits
that?
the heart.
Like, we have schools right now begging for supplies. I literally just placed an Amazon order to send to our school because they don't have classroom supplies. Like, we need to be able to move a little faster on this process. This has been going on. One, we didn't even have it in place. We still don't have it in place, you know, and it's just years of how are we impacting our district by not having that in place. You hear, you know, the community say, well, the Board of Ed had money left over, but nobody's going to the town to say, what did you do with that money? Because we don't get it in a pot that we keep and spend. We have to pull from the town. Maybe some former council person could tell us what happened, I don't know. But we have to do better. Like, we really have to do better. This is really, really difficult to be a part of and to see what is happening in our district. We have to get our processes fixed.
I absolutely agree. I would just add humbly that we really, through the cabinet team, are trying really hard to work with our schools to make
And
sure
this isn't
that
towards
they-
you, I'm
No,
just
no,
really
I
passionate
know.
about it because
I just don't want you to
we're really
think they have
struggling
absolutely
here
nothing.
financially.
But I hear you, and you're absolutely right.
Thank you. Mr. David?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a friendly amendment, and you'd have to agree to it, on your proposal and actually add the 2 enrichment teachers back into the budget as well. You'd have to accept that, though. But just,
I'd like to revisit Mrs. Corcoran's initial request was to keep 1.
we'll keep 1? Oh, we'll keep 1? Okay, keep 1. I'll amend that. I'm sorry.
I'm okay with 7.
Well, 1 and 2, fine. Well, 2 are cut from the budget, that's all I'm saying. So we'll still cut 1 then, that's fine.
Which is currently open.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So that's $80,000.
Madam Chair, just, so,
Chair.
I know Mr. David had offered a friendly amendment. Recently on zoning, we had issue where we were told there's no such thing as a friendly amendment as far
It
as...
depends on your rules, I'm sorry.
Well, as far as Robert's Rules of Order and legality, just a suggestion, but perhaps if we want to make amendments should be made and voted on and then added to the original motion, but...
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Thank you, but there was no motion on enrichment teachers, so I think the point is moved.
No, there was a motion on our motion. I was making an amendment to our motion, having the enrichment teacher.
That wasn't ours. Ours was the high school.
Right, I was adding that to that.
Oh, gotcha. I thought you were adding
No.
first.
In 1,
Okay.
because 1's less than 2.
Mrs. Bedell, did you have anything?
But I just did have another comment too about so the number you had talked about was 1.7 million of surpluses the Board of Ed had. Is that correct?
Yes, during COVID years, that's absolutely correct.
And then, so this year we have a $2 million deficit in special ed. correct?
Correct.
So if that money had been put into, that 1.7 million had been put into a fund that could have been used to offset the deficit from special ed, that fund would still be about $250,000 in a deficit position. So, I mean, to use it for things like supplies or whatever it might be, that fund would still be underfunded, but the town is going to have to pay for that, whether it's through a special fund that the money's set aside, or whether it's by funding it through this year's budget. Either way, the town has to pay for that budget. So whether it's, and I appreciate the emotion around this fund, but that fund would be $250,000 in the hole, so there wouldn't be money for school supplies to pull out of that fund, because that fund would be underfunded, even if the town did set it aside. And the town will have to pay for that deficit. That money comes from the town side. You know, it doesn't go away, it's there. It's gonna have to be paid, so that fund would be underfunded, even if it was there, so.
If I may just clarify a bit, we were very attentive to the problems with our budget right from the very beginning, and we had a very similar situation last year. And as a result, we put the spending freeze on in October. In addition to the open position report that you received and that you actually get every month from Ms. Brown's office, we have come to the board back in October, and we are coming again in February, where Susan Nicholson in her office does a complete analysis of open positions and savings. So I share that because when you get your financial report from me, which I believe will be in the packet tomorrow, you're going to see that right now I'm projecting a year-end balance of a deficit of about $1 million. The reason for that is because we have struggled to fill positions, but we're being very cautious about our spending right now, because we're not allowing people to spend down their discretionary accounts, and the savings in salaries right now is helping us. Obviously, as a school board, it's our responsibility collectively to make certain that we do everything possible to end the year in the black. Even though the town is ultimately responsible, that's not where we want to be. We do not want to end the year, and I have never in my career ended a year in the red. So this is very concerning on all levels, and that's why I had hoped that the town would take the initiative to fund the Education Reserve Fund so that it could be a collaborative effort that we could say, well, we don't have to really stress about this. We have a little bit of a cushion, because it's a very volatile portion of every district's budget. It just is. I've been with a number of districts. It's a statewide issue, and you probably are aware that at the state legislature, they are discussing how better to fund special education, because the current process doesn't work for any district. So to your point, if there were 1.7 million in there right now, we could no longer have a freeze, and we could end the year without probably having to take much more than $1 million out of there. So we are trying to manage our budget very, very carefully.
It changes the sequence of how we can adequately put the materials in our teachers' hands so they can teach kids. So instead of initiating the freeze in October, we can probably go through the majority of the year knowing that at the end of the year, the town is still going to bear the responsibility, but that number is absorbed in far different ways. So there's a sequence effect on this in terms of the quality of experience that our kids have by having access to the right materials.
Thank you, Dr. Sunday. Thank you, Mrs. Mangini. I just want to, I want to applaud, I guess, the savings of the open positions and what that's affording us, but I also want to caution, having open positions only creates staff doing two people's jobs or overcrowding in our classrooms, so we should want to have a fully staffed staff. Correct. Thank you. Mrs. Lance?
I think going forward, we really and truly need, as a finance committee or as a board, to advocate that that money is put into that account. Because when I was on this board 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, Ben, we're not sure, we could go back in our notes and find out, Teresa. We were told that money was going into that fund, so we just assumed, what happens, that the money was in there. So I'm appalled to sit here tonight and hear this. And now obviously there's not going to be any money this year to put in the fund, because we're going to be in the wrong color this year, at the end, hopefully not. But we just really need to make sure that that money is in there, because I want to know where that money went.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I think that's a discussion we need to, not we, someone has to have with the town, because that's ridiculous.
Mr. David?
Yeah, the one thing I'd like to revisit on page 43 is the legal services increase from the adopted budget of 260,000 in expenditures. I've seen a 251,000 on legal services, asking for an increase at 95,000, which is 35%. I think that's one cut we could actually make in this budget to offset some of the ads that we put on there, and that's about $95,000. So. But unless I don't know of something that's going to cost $100,000 more in legal services this year. And that's page 43, under the 300 section.
Yeah, that's not all legal services. I'm going to tell you in a moment what that 95,000 is if you get a look. Susan knows off the top of her head.
It's purchase professional services, so it would fall under that object code in the state, but it's not legal services. It's for food service consultant, I believe, and
Right, so that's,
Food service program consult, public safety liaison, and superintendent professional services.
and that was one of the questions that Kristen had asked that we provided to you this evening for clarification. So just so, for clarification purposes on legal services, it's level funded. It did not increase. It's the other accounts that got pulled into that.
Mrs. Weiss?
And through the chair, what contracts are we negotiating this year? I know the teachers just settled their contracts, so maybe.
I think it's administrators coming up. Is that correct, Courtney? And right now, we're in negotiations with custodians.
Okay.
And Andrea knows all of this.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions, any suggestions, any recommendations that anyone has from this committee, from all of the presentations and all the information that was shared with us? Yes, Mrs.
I
Keeley?
just want to thank Dr. Sunday earlier when you were explaining to us how the roles of the administrators work within our organization, because, you know, over the years, and yes, we want to save money, and you'll hear it's administrative, you know, top heavy, etc. Or here's a cut that's coming without explaining, here was the role, here's how it's going to impact us, so that we can feel confident in the decision to either add a position or to eliminate a position that's being proposed. And I just want to thank you for breaking it down and explaining the reasoning behind it and how we're going to manage based on those decisions, because it hasn't been there before, so thank you.
You're certainly welcome. It's so this has been a rich experience for me personally, and I have to give a lot of credit to Pam and Jeannie, Susan Nicholson, and the whole team, all of our administrators. It's my personal philosophy that we don't ever want to touch people, right? It's anchored in research, and in my experience here, next month it'll be a full year that the board appointed me. So I've had the chance to be front and center to see how hard people are working. And we are in need of some improvement, and we're going to move in that direction. We have the foundational ingredients, but we need people to do that work. And whenever we go through a hiring process, everybody comes in with a very specific expertise that makes this engine work. All of our schools across the portfolio of 13 schools are committed to doing this work for Stratford kids, but there are certain essential cogs in this machine that have to be in place for this machine to work well. And I think it's a process where we have to educate our constituents to let them know that even though we're advocating for these positions, we're not being irresponsible with what we're asking for. But at the same time, and I had a conversation with our principals today, both at the secondary and elementary level, we're putting ourselves to deliver. We want to deliver. We feel we can deliver, and we're going to hold ourselves to that standard. So we're asking that our community, we're asking that the board continue to support us so we can continue to do some good work for our kids. And we'll take it one day at a time, and Sunday we'll get a chance to celebrate Stratford. Sunday soon.
That was a good ad. Okay, well, there's nothing on our agenda requiring action this evening. The conversation, Mr. Burrow,
I was just going to go to your next thing.
would you like to make a motion?
I assume you wanted a motion to adjourn?
Thank you very much. Motion to adjourn, Mr. Burrow, seconded by Mrs. Lance, and we will reconvene Monday at 6:30 here. No, I'm sorry, Stratford High School Auditorium for our Finance Committee meeting, followed by our Board of Education meeting. Can adjourn at 7:29.